This is Mark and Charity's Coffee Podcast.
It's Mark and Charity Coffee Podcast for Tuesday, March 7th today, and this podcast comes with a warning.
Does it? What's the warning?
Because we're going to talk about Murder Monday.
That's your day.
Yeah, of course, the joke is that, well, I got nothing to do, so let's go find a documentary with a body count on Netflix, right?
What is it?
I don't know what it is.
It just draws you in.
Who figured that out? That there was, if we could just, find a streaming service. And we had talked about that before DocFest, when we were talking with Holly and Jody about that. And I said, I never would have guessed 10 years ago that documentaries was going to be something that I would gravitate to. And then up came things like Unsolved Mysteries and...
I've always loved Unsolved Mysteries.
And sort of like true crime.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know how I was just going to get sucked into it.
Because literally, I would say before documentaries, all you had was Unsolved Mysteries. And I mean the show.
Yeah.
Like, I remember as a kid.
It was always weird things.
Yeah, it wasn't just always murder. It wasn't always crime so much as just oddities.
Lights in the sky.
Yeah, it included UFOs and the triangle.
Bermuda Triangle.
Triangle, and just odd things that would happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, then documentaries came along, and then all of a sudden it was like, whoa. And documentaries on everything, but you're right. The crime ones. And we saw it with Dahmer even last year with the show, not necessarily a documentary, but a series on him. Just this fascination people have with true crime. And I think it's because it's so, like for me, it's unfathomable. Like it's so out there,
right? Yeah,
that someone could do this. It's the unbelievable side of it that, wow, what possesses a person to do anything like that?
I think for me, the earliest probably would be Michael Moore, right? Something like Bowling for Columbine. Might have been the first one.
Okay, yeah.
Where here was the literal true crime, unbelievable tragedy you could not fathom of circa 2000, 2001. But it was 20 years ago. And then the documentary would have been 20 years ago, where for the first time, you spend some time sort of delving into the backstory and the pathology that leads up to that. It isn't simply the news story. You're given the entire atmosphere around which something like that could have happened.
Well, and in that case, in that particular instance, it was young people too.
Yeah.
Like children.
Yeah.
How does a child do that? And as a child, how are you part of that? So it just, you're right, dives into, well, how would that happen? How was that possible?
And that's being shown in movie theaters, and it's up for Academy Awards and all this. So all of a sudden, now we have streaming services that are just clamoring for content, and out come all of these true crime documentaries. There are 2 and 3 series long, from missing people to offing your siblings to offing your spouse.
This is horrible. You're right to have a warning at the beginning of this.
And shows like Mastermind came out. Is that what that one was called?
Yeah, they're not doing a third season. Did you see
but
that?
It was so done. Good.
Well, but again, it was a show, but it incorporated true elements. So
of serial killers.
Yeah, it focused on actual serial killers that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, we can all say we're above that, but when there's nothing going on, you can just flip on a 48-minute episode of a missing person of some place in Britain, and I'll watch it for 2 hours. And
I'd like to believe I'm learning something too.
Right.
As sick as that is, it's like, well, no, I'd like to learn more about this person. I should know more about
I spend more time Googling when I'm done, like the Madeleine McCann disappearance in Portugal. Tragic. What happened there? So we're talking about this because my wife does a wonderful concert with her brother of special needs every Monday afternoon.
Oh, okay.
So
I was like, where are you going with this?
She uses her computer and mine to play the songs and sing along with them. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. I probably shouldn't be talking about it. It's a very personal thing, but my wife's a saint. It's a wonderful thing she does. So I can't use my computer for an hour and a half. So I've created Murder Mondays, where I go downstairs and I throw on a streaming service and I try and find some true crime show to watch. And you got me on the Alex Murdaugh.
Yeah. We talk about being fascinated. I have been obsessed with this story. And I heard it first late last year. So it was after he was arrested. Dateline did a story on him, and I listened to the Dateline episodes in the mornings when I'm getting, because I just don't save it for Monday. I like listening to it all the time. So I was listening to that episode, and they did a story on Alex Murdaugh, who is from South Carolina, lawyer, old money, small town. Every cliche you could think of to go along with just that description basically encapsulates what this family is. But anyway, he was accused of killing his wife and son. And so they were focusing on him. But when you dive into his life and the history of this family, it's like, holy crap, why haven't you been in jail before?
Well, and the thing about...
It's just fascinating to me. And he was sentenced this week, so that's what brought it all back up. Or last week.
2 life sentences?
Two life sentences. He was found guilty, yeah.
The documentary itself, the first 90% of it is, I'm not going to say has nothing to do with him, but it's,
it's more his son.
His son, the one that he murdered, had been enabled in the system when his recklessness had killed another teen.
Yeah.
Maybe he and his brother were a part of killing another young man.
Yep.
They don't know. Their names keep popping up.
Housekeeper another
died.
One. Like there's 4 people just in that documentary. 4 people associated to them. A mysterious, quote unquote, mysterious death
over 3 or 4 years time. And it was just,
it's not a long period of time either.
And when you talk about the enabling and the entitlement, because
like
they
I
would
said,
literally
old money.
Go into the hospital with witnesses and intimidate them and say, you didn't see what you said because
this is what happened.
We're these people and, South Carolina, small town.
Yeah. I will be shocked if it doesn't become a movie. If Hollywood doesn't. But there's so many different elements to it. I just can't get enough of it. And I don't know what that says about me, but
what is it about it? Because it's one of many.
I think because there are so many, I said it to you, it's that idea of, and Hollywood has done it, and you hear the stories, I think, of cover-ups and payoffs and intimidation and the rest. And I'm not naive to think that it doesn't happen, but when it's so blatant, like in this case, where this family for years basically ran this town, like everybody knew if it involved one of the Murdaugh boys or Alex himself, it would be swept under the rug. I don't know how that happens.
Yeah.
I guess that's the fascination.
Right.
Like, how does that go on? Honest, in this day and age, how does that still happen? So it's that fascination of, wow, it really does.
And I suppose when you get to this point, it's like, how else did you think it would end? Do you think they would just stop? I'm not saying he thought he would murder his wife, but did you really think that they were going to, because the brushes with the law that his son had, don't you think that would kind of wake them up to say, hey, we really should clean up our act, as opposed to, hey, as long as you keep letting us get away with it, we'll just take it to the final end, and I'll just...
And I've read stories and seen coverage of this story, of course, and they said him being sentenced, they don't believe he actually thought he ever would. He never thought he would go to jail. He never thought his lawyers would just get it. Again, I'm not saying throw money at it, but it would be.
But you've been enabled for
after.
So long and entitled.
Yeah,
sure. I mean,
it's
not me.
I didn't do this.
Yeah.
I didn't. No, this is the story I told you, so it's the truth, whether it is or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is what it's going to be. Yeah.
Evidence says otherwise, Mr. Murtaugh. Well,
and I think that's part of it too, because watching, I don't know how you felt, but by the end of that docuseries, or by the end of that series, I was getting so angry because he's putting the blame on other people when it, like, evidence shows it wasn't him. It's corroborated by witnesses that it wasn't what they're telling people. You know what I mean? Like the young lad who took the blame for the boat crash.
Yep.
How they were trying to blame this kid for the boat crash. No, people saw that Paul Murdaugh was driving the boat. Evidence shows Paul Murdaugh would drive, and they still continued saying he wasn't driving, and that just infuriated me.
Yeah.
I thought, no, like, just because you keep saying it doesn't make it so, doesn't make it right. Like, why are you getting away with this?
I was starting on radio, we're talking about storytelling, right? And somebody had said to me, there's only 2 good stories, and that's when somebody ordinary does something extraordinary, or when somebody extraordinary does something ordinary. So the fact that these extraordinary people are actually, turns out, are just normal people, that's what makes a remarkable story. Here are these people who we had up on, and I go back to Bernie Madoff.
Yeah.
And I watched that documentary. Here's like supposedly the smartest guy on Wall Street, where again, enabled by the FCC because it's Bernie Madoff, so they didn't want to dive too deep. Because let's face it, the stock market's a little bit of a shell game anyway. It runs on trust. That you want to believe in the stock market. Otherwise, if everybody pulls the money out, we get another depression. So we have to kind of trust everybody. And he really doubled down on that. And people kept saying, no, this is a shell game. You need to investigate that guy. You can't. And the FCC went in, they investigated him, and he sweet-talked them, and they walked out and said, sorry, we wasted your time, Mr. Madoff. And I thought that's exactly the same thing that happened here, that these extraordinary people talked their way out of it until they're finally just caught, and then we realize we've allowed this to go on for so long. It's an extraordinary story.
It is. It really is. And apparently it's over now because he's in jail. I don't know. I just, part of me hopes it's not, because I don't know what I'm going to do now.
Because you just got to find more. There are just so many of these documentaries out there that are really.
But to get, and that's a good example too, because it's like you get to a point where you're untouchable.
Yeah.
And not just in your own mind, but the people around you. You're just untouchable.
Yep. And they will go to bat for you, whether they know you're guilty or not, because they're forever tied to you. Steel cord of history. And, what happens to Buster, his son, and if he was involved in anything, maybe he
Buster's
flipped.
the only, and I look at him too, and I think, okay, how are you not involved in some of this? But at the same time, what you've been through, like the trauma he has now, because he's lost his family. He's lost not just his immediate family, but everything his family carried. Like the business is gone, the money's gone, like everything is gone. Everything he had.
And the law firm was started by his great grandfather or something. It's been like 100 since 1910.
They kicked his father out because he was taking money,
stealing money from them.
Clients. Like it's a mess.
Spoiler
if you get a chance, watch it. It's very interesting.
It's very well done. I wasn't prepared for that first episode because I didn't think there was that much of a backstory. But you need the backstory to really understand what happened, what everybody now believes and he's convicted of doing that night, and whatever made him think he was going to get away with it.
Which I really think he did. I thought, again, this is what I'm telling them. This is what happened.
And everybody will believe me because I'm one of the top lawyers in town, and there's no way the law will not take my side.
Did you watch it this week then? For your Monday, or was it last week?
Did I watch it last week? Maybe even 2 weeks ago. Okay. No, I think it was last week I watched it. And it was just days before the verdict came in. So maybe it was 2 weeks ago. But very, very interesting one. So if you have any other great Netflix shows that you think we should be watching of the true crime genre.
As Mark likes to call it, Murder Mondays.
Murder Mondays. We'll see what we got there. But it is an amazing time to watch some of these stories. And it's crazy. When, like Hollywood, for example, making Where the Crawdads Sing. I had no idea about that story.
Had you read the book?
Backstory, I had not.
I'm reading the book right now.
Yeah. And there are just so many of these, and we never would have known them because there's nobody retells the story. If it isn't Lizzie Borden, right? Nobody retells a story until we now have these streaming outlets that say, you know what, I'm going to tell a story from 15 years ago you may not remember about this missing person. And 3 episodes later, it's like, what a gripping tale. Wow, how did I not know that?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be, as you said about Lizzie Borden, it doesn't have to be to that level.
Right. Sensationalism sells. But
it does. But going back to the Unsolved Mysteries, just a interesting story. You get the right people and the right the story around it. You just become enthralled by it. You just get sucked in. It's like, wow, how did I miss that? That went right under the radar.
And then the other ones that I like are the ones where they do flat out solve it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the amazing detective who spent 12 years, wouldn't let it go, and then always the fluke clue, the crazy comment made at a dinner party, the the phone call that somebody thought, I don't know anything, but I heard something and maybe this means something, that turns it. And you think, wow. And finally it's solved. The dumb thing that the person does. And I read one of the BTK killer in Kansas. Bind, Torture, Kill was their name.
Oh, yes.
And started taunting the police and was unaware of how technology worked because he went under the radar for a long time and then surfaced again and sent them an email. And the email they could trace back to a church where his name was on it. He didn't realize that the word pad that he used suddenly has his name. Had no idea.
Or the path where you save something.
Yeah, right.
So you have detective work.
So if you had just never done that, but they can't help it. You know, when you've been showing off your whole career as a criminal, and now technology catches it. I'm so fascinated by that stuff.
It is. It's really fascinating.
So, anyway, yep. So Tuesdays are just great because my mind was filled with that garbage on Mondays of being like, wow. So anyway, if you haven't seen it, that's a very interesting one. Very interesting one.
And we do bring it up because it's just been...
Charity's been talking about it for days.
I've just been... yeah. Well, so hopefully now I'm not.
I remember back 50 years ago now when the Charles Manson case was on television, and that was must-see TV. And of course, you don't have to go any farther than the O.J. Simpson trial. Like, this stuff does grip people. It's a pop culture phenomenon.
Well, and you mentioned O.J. There's another documentary on Netflix about that too. And I say you learn things from watching these. You do, because I don't want to say how old I was when that happened. But I was younger, so some of the details are a little foggy.
Sure.
So I did go back and watch it, and it was interesting. I'm like, I didn't know that part of it.
Yeah, because, you hear pop culture bit about Johnny Cochran saying, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. But what was the whole deal with that?
And all these years, even though he was found not guilty, everybody keeps saying he is guilty. Of course he's guilty. He did this. He did that. And it's like, well, no, he was found not guilty. And you kind of start to go along with it. Well, he must have been guilty. And then watching the series, I'm like, how did they not include that? How did they clearly something else was going on here?
Marcia was very unhappy, the lead prosecutor. But it's funny, to use the proper legal terms, he was found not guilty, which is not the same of saying they just couldn't prove he did it. So you're found not guilty. We're not saying you're innocent of it, but you're found not guilty. Yeah. And so, really. And then Scott Peterson with his wife. I mean, there's so many cases that became so that when these streaming services come out, a thing like Alex Murdaugh, my gosh, that was just made for a 3 or 4 episode afternoon. Fascinating stuff. And so
I get, there'll be a movie because there's so much to it. Yeah. There's got to be a movie.
Yeah. So who would play him? I'm looking.
Jim Gaffigan? I don't know.
He's funny how he looks, right?
And to see him, and I think I said this to you too, like he's not, to me, seeing the pictures of him, he's not an intimidating man. Like he's not someone I would think would be intimidating to others who would, like he's
Paul
tall.
Dano would play him.
Paul Dano. I'm not familiar with Paul Dano.
Would make, or who is the really good actor, and I feel badly now not remembering his name right off the hop, who's married to one of my other favorite actresses.
Penelope Cruz?
No, and I can picture him. He was in Breaking Bad.
That guy.
And I feel terrible. Tomorrow I'll remember.
Not Bryan Cranston, but...
And not Aaron Paul.
He
played a quiet... but I think he was up for an Academy Award last year, but he didn't win. Anyway, I can picture him. He would look good in that role. But... Anyway,
it would be interesting.
It would be interesting. And this has been quite the Mark and Charity.
Maybe you could write that next.
So, I'll write a few of those.
The screenplay.
So that's a podcast today, everybody.
There we go.
Get out there and send us in your favorite documentaries that we should be watching that were
and they don't have to be true crime.
Well, I don't know.
I like true crime.
I do.
But documentaries in general, there's just something, as I said, you learn something, right? When it's a documentary.
Right, yep.
You get to see behind the scenes. You get to maybe pick up some information you didn't know about, dive into a subject or industry or topic that you had no interest in before. And now after seeing it, it's like, I need to learn more about that.
I've already seen Don't F with Cats. You ever seen that one?
No, and I'm not going to.
Yep. So you don't. There's that one.
Nope.
There's plenty of them out there that you can quote unquote Enjoy. It's the Mark and Charity Coffee Podcast. Join us tomorrow for International Women's Day. We got quite a program set up for you tomorrow.
Big day. And it's not just going to be us. We have some wonderful women here in the Quinte area, grateful that they took the time to speak with us. They're going to all be joining us tomorrow. Everyone from the fire chief, we've got members of the police department, not-for-profit, everyone across the board here, teachers, everyone's going to talk to us.
Director of Education, and so quite a group that are going to be spending part of their morning with us tomorrow, talking about educating and gratitude. And then I really like your thoughts on International Women's Day.
Am I sharing my thoughts tomorrow?
Yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you would, if you don't mind.
I better collect them then. Organize them.
Tomorrow morning from 6 until 9 on 95.5 Hits FM. Enjoy your day.